The gravy had already gone cold, and so had everything else at that table. My mother sat at the head of the dining room with the posture of a judge about to deliver a sentence. My brother Carter leaned back in his chair like a man who had already won. His wife Melissa swirled her wine without making eye contact with anyone. I had driven 4 hours from Chicago to have Sunday dinner with my family. What I got instead was an ambush. My mother placed both hands flat on the tablecloth and said the words she had clearly been rehearsing for weeks. "We've decided to liquidate all the family properties, Elena. The lake house in Michigan, the cabin in Colorado, the rental units in Nashville. Everything. The proceeds will be divided 3 ways. Between me, Carter, and Melissa." I repeated the words slowly. 3 ways. "You chose your path," Carter said. "You left 5 years ago. Moved to Chicago, built your little firm, stopped showing up. Why should you benefit from what Mom and Dad built? What they didn't know was that I had been the one who built it, and what they were about to discover would cost them everything. My name is Elena Vane. I am 38 years old, and I run a real estate investment firm in Chicago that I built from nothing. I grew up in a small town in Ohio in a family that looked picture-perfect from the outside. My father worked in construction. My mother managed the household and the family properties with a tight fist and a tighter smile. My brother Carter was the golden son. Loud, charming, everyone's favorite at the county fair. I was the quiet one. The one who read contracts instead of attending bonfires. The one who left for college on a full scholarship and never quite fit back into the space I had left behind. When my father died 6 years ago, the estate was a disaster. Mountains of debt. Properties mortgaged beyond their value. Carter's failed brewery had drained what little equity remained. My mother was too busy grieving her social status to read a single document. I spent 18 months untangling the mess quietly. I restructured the assets into a series of tiered LLCs. I paid off the creditors. I covered the property taxes out of my own pocket. I built a legal framework that protected the family from the very problems Carter kept creating. I never asked for credit. I never expected a thank you. What I did not expect was to sit at a Sunday dinner table and be told I was worth nothing. I had driven to Ohio that Sunday because my mother called and said she wanted the family together. I brought wine. I brought flowers. I sat in the chair across from Carter and noticed immediately that something was off. He wouldn't look at me. Melissa kept checking her phone. My mother kept smoothing the tablecloth with her palm like she was trying to iron out her nerves. When the food came, Carter started talking about the market, about estate planners, about consolidation. I listened carefully. Then my mother said it. Everything would be liquidated. The proceeds split 3 ways. My name was not one of the 3. "You aren't here when the pipes burst," my mother said. "You aren't here for the birthdays. You send checks to ease your conscience and call it being a daughter. I have been paying the property taxes on the Colorado cabin for 4 years," I said. "Money isn't presents, Elena." Carter stabbed at his food and said, "Don't bother calling Arthur either. We've retained new legal counsel. Someone who understands legacy." I looked at the 3 of them, my mother's cold, practiced gaze, Carter's barely concealed satisfaction, Melissa's quiet complicity in the corner. They had rehearsed this. This was not a conversation. This was a verdict. I stood up. I kept my face completely still. "Is that the final word?" I asked. "It's the only word," Carter said. I walked out of the dining room, through the foyer lined with family photographs, and into the warm Ohio night. I was halfway to my car when my phone rang. My attorney Arthur's voice was calm but tight. "Elena, I just received a notification through the court portal. Carter's new counsel filed a petition this evening. A petition by sale of all assets under the Vane Family Trust." "That was fast," I said. "There's more. They haven't just included the inherited properties. They've attached your personal holdings. Your office building in Chicago. Your residential condo. Your investment portfolio." I stopped walking. The gravel crunched under my shoes. The moon sat pale and flat behind the oak trees at the edge of the driveway. "On what grounds?" "They're claiming your personal assets were seeded with family funds, and therefore constitute part of the communal estate. Elena, they aren't just cutting you out of the inheritance. They're trying to take everything you built on your own. I looked back at the house. The warm yellow light from the dining room windows glowed like something precious. Inside, they were probably already celebrating. "How long do we have?" I asked. "They've requested an emergency injunction to freeze your accounts. If we don't move, you could be locked out of your own liquidity by Monday morning." I took one slow breath. "Arthur, do we still have the original deeds from the 2018 restructuring?" "Of course." "Good. Let them file. Let them lie on record. It makes the fall much harder." Pause here for a moment. Drop a comment below. If you sat at that dinner table and heard those words, what would your very first move have been? Would you have confronted them right there, or would you have walked out quietly and planned every single step in silence? I walked out quietly. The next 48 hours were coffee, blue screen light, and absolute focus. I sat in my Chicago office with the skyline bleeding orange and pink through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and I opened a file I had built years ago and hoped I would never need. I called it Project Horizon. Here is what my family never understood about me. When our father died and the estate was drowning in debt, I had not simply cleaned up the mess. I had restructured the entire thing with surgical precision. Every property had been moved into tiered LLCs with specific clauses built in for exactly this kind of scenario. One of those clauses was a buyback provision. If the trust failed to maintain the property taxes on any asset, ownership reverted to the primary financier. For 4 consecutive years, I had been paying those taxes out of my own accounts, which meant legally, quietly, and completely above board. I already owned far more than they realized. I also made one other move during those 48 hours. Carter had taken out a $3 million balloon mortgage against the Colorado cabin 18 months ago to fund another business expansion. He had defaulted on that loan 3 weeks earlier. I bought the debt from the bank. I was now Carter's primary creditor. And when he filed that court petition claiming my assets were legally linked to the trust, he had done something he did not understand yet. He had legally linked himself to a debt he could not pay. I poured another cup of coffee and watched the sun come up over Lake Michigan. My phone rang at 6 in the morning. "What did you do?" Carter's voice was not a question. It was the sound of a man who had just opened a door he could not close again. "Good morning, Carter." "Elena, the bank. I called the branch this morning. They told me the Lake House and the Nashville units are not under the trust anymore. They said they were transferred 6 months ago." "That's correct. You can't do that. That is family land." It was family land. I exercised the buyback clause in the 2018 restructuring agreement. The one your mother signed in front of 3 witnesses and a notary. Since the trust failed to maintain the property taxes I had been covering out of pocket, ownership reverted to me. It's all documented. That is not legal. Arthur disagrees. So does the court filing I submitted 40 minutes ago. Silence. "Carter, when you filed that petition claiming my personal assets are part of the trust, you created a legal problem for yourself. Because the trust doesn't only hold land. It holds the debt. Your $3 million balloon mortgage on the Colorado cabin. The one you defaulted on 3 weeks ago." I heard him breathing. "I purchased that debt from the bank. I am your primary creditor. And since you have spent the last 48 hours arguing in court that we are a single financial entity, you have handed me the legal right to offset your debts against your remaining shares of the estate." More silence. "Which by my calculation are now worth 0. I heard my mother's voice in the background. Sharp. Panicked. "Elena, please," Carter said. The bravado was completely gone. "Mom is in the other room. We have movers scheduled for the Nashville units. We already took a deposit." "You took a deposit on a property you don't own?" A short pause. "Carter, that is called fraud." 2 hours later, Arthur sent over the final documents. The injunction had been pulled. Their attorney had seen my counterfiling and walked away from the case within the hour. A lawyer who understood what was coming did not want proximity to the collapse. Not only did I own the properties they had tried to sell, but I held the deed to the house my mother was currently sitting in. I spent that afternoon in Millennium Park. The air smelled like cut grass and Lake Michigan. Children were running through the Crown fountain, shrieking and laughing. I sat on a bench and watched them for a long time. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. He's been drinking since this morning. He smashed the cabinet in the hallway. Elena, we don't know what to do. Can you help us, please? I stared at the screen. The old version of me would have typed out a solution immediately, would have offered a loan, would have smoothed every jagged edge to make them comfortable again. I typed back 3 sentences. Contact a realtor. I am listing the house on Monday. You have 30 days to make arrangements. I deleted the thread. I blocked the number. 1 week later, I sat in my office while Arthur dropped a thick envelope on my desk. It's done. They've cleared out the Nashville units. Carter is staying at an extended stay motel off the highway. Your mother moved in with her sister in Columbus. The Colorado cabin foreclosure is complete. You own it outright. No liens. No encumbrances. He paused. What do you want to do with it? I thought about the cabin. The way the morning light hit the porch. The smell of pine trees before everything went sour. Sell it. Donate the full proceeds to the youth shelter on the south side. I want it off my books. I want everything with their name on it gone. Arthur nodded and left. I turned my chair toward the window. The city stretched out in every direction. Glass and steel and 10,000 people building something out of whatever they had left. I was not the villain of their story. I knew that was how they would tell it. I was the cold one, the one who abandoned the family, the one who destroyed everything. But I had not destroyed anything. I had simply stopped holding up a ceiling for people who would have watched it fall on me without flinching. My phone showed one final bank notification. The lake house sale had cleared. The number on the screen was enough to change a life entirely. I looked at it for a moment. Then I picked up my pen and went back to work. There were new contracts to sign, new buildings to design, a life to live where the only person I had to answer to was the woman reflected in the glass. My family had wanted to cash out the properties. In the end, they had cashed out the only thing that actually had any value, the bridge back to me. And as I signed my name to a new merger agreement, I realized that for the first time in my life, the price was exactly right. Drop a comment below and tell me honestly, did I go too far or did they get exactly what they deserved? I read every single comment. If the story moved you, subscribe to this channel. Every week we bring you real stories about betrayal, survival, and the kind of quiet strength that never makes headlines but absolutely should. You being here matters, and so does every story we tell.